Okay. Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. Each weekday here on GCN, we strive to expose the destructive myths that are associated with religion and politics, patriotism and the media, with military and economic schemes. Instead of merely presenting the news, our mission here is to understand what is actually occurring behind the headlines while predicting how these events will shape our world. Then, during our second hour, we will engage God on His terms through evidence and reason, since His is the lone reliable voice in an exceedingly unreliable world. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion anytime over the next 2 hours, is 877-300-7645. It's interesting to have the presidential spokesperson try to defend the NSA spying on ordinary Americans. They have been unable to point to a single success of the NSA spying. They trumped up this whole big whoop-de-doo of chatter at the same level as the chatter that was prior to 9/11 in 2001 is the first time that they've had credible evidence of internet chatter amongst the jihadists that, although they would never use that term, they would be terrorists, and those linked to al-Qaeda since before 9/11. And as a result of that and the effectiveness of the NSA screening procedures, we closed down our embassies throughout the Middle East, told travelers not to travel, and it was all Chicken Little. It was a public press release by Zawahiri to the Yemenite website. And al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is little more than a website. About 200 members at the peak of the affiliate al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And if it wasn't for the fact that their communications were principally in English and very well presented from a technical and aesthetic point of view, in English online, they would be essentially unknown. But that press release and the website was sufficient to have the U.S. government say that, boy, look now, proof this NSA system of screening information is effective, and we have protected our people from a credible terrorist threat. And what was it? Nothing. Nothing. We even had Yemen say, oh boy, we shut down a plot by the al-Qaeda types. And then just to see if we could goad them into it, it's like kicking a hornet's nest. Last week we used drones to kill, murder 7 Yemeni Muslims. And when they didn't play as we were trying to goad them into playing, we sent drones again yesterday and killed an unknown number of additional Yemenite Muslims. Kicking the hornet's nest, hoping that they'll play to make it look like we really are at war with them, like they really are fighting, like they really did have a plot, like we really were doing something intelligence, when in fact it was all a game. And it's being set up and perpetrated on the American people in a way that is just deplorable. And why is it that so few people are saying, wait a minute, this is all a ruse?
There was definitely terrorism going on there. It just seems like it was more on our end.
Oh, when you use a military to strike at a civilian target,
yeah,
it's terrorism, baby. And so if you want to know who the terrorists were, you're right, Scott. It was the United States. We used military weapons to strike at a home and at a vehicle that were carrying civilians. You know, we didn't strike at the Yemenite military. We didn't strike at any military unit. We struck at civilians. We were the terrorists. But we have become the world's greatest hypocrite. And then the White House says, you know, the NSA is only collecting what it is explicitly authorized to collect. Well, it's explicitly authorized to collect everything. That's what Snowden revealed. They're explicitly authorized by a kangaroo court that has approved every request that has been made to it to collect everything. So then he says, we're not reading every American's email. Of course they're not. The Americans who are comatose, who are afraid to put their head above the crowd, who are just going along like lemmings off the cliff, there's no reason to be the least bit concerned about them. They're concerned about those who are doing what we're doing, exposing them, condemning them, telling anyone who will listen, you ought not trust them. They are not serving your best interests. They are working against your interests. It's those people whose emails and web clicks and telephone conversations they monitor. I want to return to the story we were covering yesterday because it is so interesting. Reuters was reporting, as well as CNN, that a secretive U.S. unit is funneling information from these intelligence intercepts, from the wiretaps, from the massive database collections of both telephone records and internet usage. And they're using that information to launch criminal investigations of Americans that have absolutely nothing to do with national security or with terrorism. Although these cases never involve national security issues, documents reviewed by Reuters show that law enforcement agents have been directed to conceal how such investigations truly begin, not only from defense lawyers, but also from prosecutors and judges. The dated documents that Reuters was given, this by a Snowden-like figure who here is still anonymous, although Reuters and CNN both interviewed collectively a score of federal agents that confirmed the practice. They show that the federal agents are trained to recreate. That means to forge, to fraudulently enter data on criminal prosecutions, to create a different investigative trail than the one that actually occurred, to effectively cover up where the information originated that led to the prosecution. It is in direct violation of the defendant's constitutional right to a fair trial. It's gaming the system. We considered the commentary by a Harvard law professor yesterday, which is, I never heard of anything like this. She went on to say that the issues that are being exposed here about the United States gaming the judicial system and operating in a wholly fraudulent manner in this system is far worse and far more troubling than the recent disclosures that the National Security Agency has been collecting domestic phone records. As a matter of fact, it's not just worse, the cases are related. It shows that the government is lying when it says that it is not using this information to spy on ordinary Americans. There's an agency in Washington with hundreds of agents specifically to use this information to prosecute Americans. And not on terrorism, not on charges of national security issues, criminal prosecution. It's not national issues. It's one thing, the Harvard law professor said, to create special rules for national security. Now, I'm opposed to that. I think when you violate your own standards, your own code of ethic, your own constitution, to deal with national security, you don't deserve to be secure. And you won't be secure because you've lost your morality. You've lost your ability to be judgmental, to be moral, to be just. And the moment you do that, the moment you're willing to bend the rules, to violate your rules, to achieve a level of perceived security in one area, what it does is open the floodgates for people to say, well, if it worked there, I'd work here. And that's exactly what this program is demonstrating. That the moment you exonerate people who are acting illegally in one area, then you can't hold them accountable in another. You know, when the United States did not prosecute Clapper, who is the head of the National Security Agency, for perjury when he lied to Congress, when they did not go after and prosecute the senators and congressmen who deliberately lied under oath to Congress regarding these programs, we lost the ability to be credible. How do you now go and prosecute somebody else for perjury if in a case this vital, this well-known, you didn't to a government employee? The Harvard law professor said, ordinary crime is entirely different. It sounds like they are phoning up investigations. The unit of the DEA that distributes the information is called the Special Operations Division, the SOD. 24 partner agencies comprise the unit, including the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the IRS, and the Department of Homeland Security. They're all conspiring together to phony up charges to prosecute in criminal court Americans. Today, of course, all of Assad's work is classified, and officials ask that its precise location in Virginia not be revealed. The documents reviewed by Reuters are marked law enforcement sensitive and thus are to be kept confidential. Our government is deceiving us. Remember that the utilization of Assad cannot be revealed or disclosed in any investigative function a document presented to agents reads. So if you're part of this unit and you use information that was seized without the government's, the constitutional right of unreasonable search and seizure, if that is how a case is being brought to bear against you, the fact that that is how they collected the information, which means it has to be excluded from trial, cannot be disclosed, so that you're guaranteed of not having a fair trial. And that's what the government's own document says. Deny, deny, deny. I'm Yahowah. This is Shattering Myths. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Just as the president's spokesperson says, we're not reading these emails. We're not spying on ordinary Americans. We have proof from internal government documents that the Department of Justice, in cahoots with the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the always credible Internal Revenue Service, is doing just that, and that they're gaming the judicial system by beginning prosecutions through what is unreasonable search and seizure. You have no probable cause to search someone's records, but you do so anyway, and any information that's garnered by our legal system because of the U.S. Constitution that was garnered without a search warrant, without probable cause, has to be excluded from the trial proceedings. And yet, not only do they begin this way with unreasonable search and seizure because they're collecting data on everyone indiscriminately, but they are told explicitly to lie, to create a false impression that the information that led to the arrest and prosecution came elsewhere, at a different time, different place, different way. Now, that means that you have a judicial system in America where the people who are acting in that system aren't abiding by the rules of the system. And when that happens, you no longer have a just society. When you cannot trust the judicial system, there's really nothing left in the society that will stand. I mean, I can't tell you, folks, how unbelievably detrimental this information is, how serious this problem is, how far-reaching the consequences of this realization really are. This is actually, when tied to the NSA spying on ordinary Americans through their internet keystrokes and their cell phone usage, and then now the realization that they're using that information in criminal proceedings, ignoring the U.S. Constitution again, and using evidence that has been gained inappropriately in trial, but lying about its origin. That means there is no justice in this country. And a country that is unjust won't stand. You know, there are scores of reasons that America will not survive the next 10 to 15 years. And literally not survive, become a country that is in anarchy. That even the semblance of democracy will be gone. That our economy will be in shambles. There are scores of reasons that that's going to be the case. But this is now very high on that list. Two senior officials who spoke to Reuters said that the process that they're using is called parallel construction. In other words, they while they're garnering information illegally, they're using that information then to show at the same time, once they then launch the investigation, trying to find ways to come up with the same information but through a legal process, so that they can show that the source of the information is legal when in fact it was not. It's parallel construction is they went down one road, but behind them, someone else using the information creates an artificial road that's parallel to it that ends up in the same place, but by taking a different route. It is unconstitutional. It is illegal. In fact, a Tampa Bay attorney, James Feldman, when he was discussed, he's the vice chairman of the criminal justice section of the American Bar Association, so his opinion ought to matter. He says it's outrageous. He says it violates the U.S. Constitution. It violates discovery rules by bearing evidence that could prove useful to criminal defendants. It is indefensible, according to the vice chairman of the criminal justice section of the American Bar Association. Lawrence Lustberg, a New Jersey defense lawyer, said that any systematic government effort to conceal the circumstances under which cases begin would not only be alarming, but blatantly unconstitutional. You know, I've drawn this parallel before. Yahowah has a constitution. It's called his Torah. When we ignore that constitution, we are out of sync with the creator of the universe. Our lives are out of sync with the creator of the universe. The United States was founded on a constitution. When the government, in all of its agencies, does what it's doing now and ignores, in fact, works against the standards of that constitution, it is outside of the norms that once built this country. I'm Yada. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. One last comment. This was by Henry Hockemeyer. He was a former federal prosecutor, so he's on the opposite side of those that we have listened to thus far. When he was shown the documents that were collected by Reuters and CNN, he says, this is horrible. They're gaming the system. He says, you can't create this kind of subterfuge. He says, even in their justification, he went on to say that even if they're only prosecuting what they consider to be drug crimes in this particular case, they're not national security cases. And he says, so if you don't draw the line here, where would you draw it? And that's the whole thing. There is no more line being drawn. And you think about from the moment drug cases. You've got an interesting situation in America. We imprison a higher percentage of our people than any other country on earth, and it's not even close. How much higher a percentage of our population is imprisoned versus the next country. We have the most in aggregate and the most by percentage. It's almost 1% of the adult male population of the country that is in prison. And the majority of those that are in prison are on some form of drug-related charge. And when you recognize how untrustworthy our government is, and how easy it is for our government to go up to someone, for example, I have never used a narcotic in my life. I mean, I'm actually one of those that I never used marijuana, never used any recreational drug ever. But how easy would it be for the FBI to do? I mean, we know they're jury-rigging the system. They're creating false evidence. To take a bag of cocaine and throw it in the back of my car and then pull me over for some technicality while I was driving to the market and say that they saw something suspicious and then arrest me for the possession of cocaine. Never used it in my life. Never even had it in my hands. And yet I would be convicted because the jury would trust the police officer, the arresting official, and the whole thing would be gamed. Just think how easy it is under this kind of a system for the government to silence those who speak out against them. Now, if you're got your head down and you don't care, and you don't care about your children's future, the fact that they don't have one in this country, and that you're one of the lemmings that is running right off the cliff with everyone else, then you've got nothing to worry about, except the fact that within 10 to 15 years, the country that you once knew will be hellish. But if you stick your head up above the crowd, if you have a backbone, if you point in a different direction, if you say, you really ought not buy into this propaganda rubbish. You really ought not be patriotic. You ought not be political. You ought not be religious, because this is the kind of schemers and the things that they're doing to you. Then you're in a position to be victimized by them. And based upon their lack of character, their lack of morality, it is precisely what they'll do. On a related issue, 2 encrypted email services have been closed down for reasons linked to U.S. intelligence leaker Edward Snowden. The Texas-based Lavabit service has shut down, but said that legal reasons prevented it from explaining why. The U.S. government shut them down. Correspondents say Lavabit appears to have been in a legal battle to stop U.S. officials from accessing its customer details. In addition, secure communications firm Silent Circle has shut its email services down because messages cannot be kept secret from the U.S. government. In a related story, Reuters is reporting U.S. soldier Bradley Manning's release of secret files to WikiLeaks in the biggest breach of classified data in the nation's history. Now, this is just amazing. Helped al-Qaeda's recruiting efforts. An expert on radical Islam testified on Thursday. Well, if you are an expert on radical Islam, then you are a nincompoop, because there is no such thing as radical Islam. And if you are focused on al-Qaeda being the problem, particularly, in fact, anywhere in the world, then you are an idiot when it comes to Islam. You cannot be an expert on Islam and speak of radical Islam or of al-Qaeda. They are irrelevant. One doesn't exist and the other is meaningless. Nonetheless, the militant group used Manning's releases to claim that the United States does not value human life. Do you think they needed what Manning released to demonstrate that the United States does not value human life when we've killed 4,000 people with our drones? When 1 million Muslims died as a result of our invasion of Afghanistan and of Iraq? Do you think that they needed it when we have rogue soldiers that go off and kill 200 of civilians, children and old men, women, in cold blood? Do you really think they needed Manning's release? Navy Commander Yusuf Abdul Inan, an advisor to the Pentagon's Joint Intelligence Task Force for Combating Terrorism. Let's just think about that. He was the Joint Intelligence Task Force for Combating Terrorism. The most terrorist nation on earth today is the United States. We use our military to kill civilians. Over the last 100 years, no nation on earth has been as prone to terrorism as the United States. Our Civil War was a war fought largely using terrorist tactics. It was finally won by the North because Sherman recognized that if he terrorized the South, that they wouldn't have the will to continue the war. We ended World War II in terrorist fashion. When we use our drones to kill Muslims, which we do with reckless abandon, we are acting like terrorists. That is the textbook definition of terrorism. And the enemy here isn't terrorism, that's a tactic. You want to combat the senseless killing of civilians, then the problem is Islam. Testifying for the prosecution, Abul Inian said al-Qaeda used a video Manning had provided to WikiLeaks of a U.S. helicopter gunship in 2007 firing at suspected insurgents in Baghdad. A dozen people were killed, including 2 Reuters news staff. Now, this is just stunning. I mean, it's just amazing how far we have fallen. The United States, and I've watched that video, the United States sent these men up in this Apache gunship. They watched a truck, a van-type truck, go down the street. They said, you know, there's somebody who looks kind of suspicious there with the truck. They might be armed. Let's shoot at it. And they did. And they killed a young boy. They killed the people inside of the truck. The 2 people that they thought were suspicious were Reuters journalists. They were holding cameras. And then when people went to their aid and tried to aid the victims that the American gunship was shooting, they shot at them. It was an absolute breach of any standard of morality. And the men that are doing it are giggling and talking about how much fun this is. Oh, really got him bad that time. Oh, look at that guy. He's still crawling. Let's get him again. Rather than taking responsibility and saying, yes, we did it. Yes, we were wrong. We apologize for having done so. This was a terrible tragedy. The United States government lied. We lied about the event. We lied about the occupants. We lied about everything. And then Reuters finally said, wait a minute, that was our staff that you murdered. And it became known that we had done this long before Bradley Manning released the video. The video, though, is chilling as to how disgusting our troops are indoctrinated in terms of their view of human life and what we did. And so rather than taking responsibility for what we did, we're blaming him for exposing our bad behavior. I mean, how upside down can you be morally when you say that the guy who had nothing to do with the crime, who simply exposes the crime, is the bad guy? He aided the enemy and not the people that pulled the trigger and killed innocent civilians. Filming it. And then killed those that tried to aid them. The helicopter also fired at a truck at which a child was seated, seriously wounded the child. Al-Qaeda used the video to demonstrate to Muslims that this could be your child. Of course. And they didn't need the video to do that. Under questioning from defense lawyer Major Thomas Hurley, the expert on radical Islam said that propaganda had long been a central function of al-Qaeda unrelated to WikiLeaks. Now, you want to tell me, how is it propaganda when you show a video with sound of Americans giggling and shooting and begging for the opportunity to shoot again at a civilian van, cars going down the street, at civilians walking down the street that are unarmed, and then shooting and killing those that tried to come to the rescue? Everything you've done is unjustifiable, grotesquely immoral. And yet you call it propaganda when the people you killed use it to say these people are immoral? You know, if you don't want someone to be able to call you immoral and ruthless, don't act in an immoral and ruthless way. So what if it wasn't WikiLeaks? Would it be something else, Hurley asked. Oh, of course, yes, Abdul Inan said. And he added that since 2011, Al-Qaeda has far more videos than that. And that he also said, if you look at Al-Qaeda, they've been largely silenced about the leaked documents. They haven't referenced them at all. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. I'm your host, Yada. You can engage in this discussion by calling 877-300-7645. We are concluding a story here regarding the testimony that is now in the sentencing phase of the WikiLeaks trial of Bradley Manning. And if you look at this particular statement, it's astonishing that we would even have a trial for this man, much less found him guilty. The lone expert on radical Muslims, radical Islam on Al-Qaeda said that Al-Qaeda has never claimed a single tactical success because of the WikiLeaks information. And it was obvious. There wasn't anything that man released that could do anybody any good other than Americans and tell Americans, you ought not trust your government, you ought not trust your State Department, you ought not trust your military. That given the opportunity, they will do the wrong thing and that they will lie far more often than they will do the right thing or tell the truth. And that they're not working in your best interest, but in opposition to your interests. That's what the WikiLeaks documents revealed. That your government is lying to you, that your government is working against your best interests. They were valuable to average Americans because they exposed the heinous nature of the U.S. government. They were worthless, completely and utterly worthless to America's alleged enemies. And that's what the expert testified. Not a single tactical success was because of the WikiLeaks information. Nada. So why did they go after him? Because the government hates being embarrassed. For the same reason that the government didn't like the fact that the video showing that it murdered 10 people in cold blood, riddled a child's body full of bullets, when they were unarmed, just civilians, walking down and driving down the street. They didn't want it released because it was embarrassing. That's the reason they prosecuted this man. What he released was embarrassing. That's the reason that America wants to incarcerate Edward Snowden, because what he released was embarrassing. It makes the government look like they're liars who are out to savage America's best interests. We have Robin calling in again today. Another question on the Muslim holidays. Hello, Robin.
Good morning. I don't mean to interrupt your behavior, but I was wondering about the continuity of if
Robin, that's not going to work, unfortunately. I don't know what telephone you're using today, but the echo is such that we can't make out what you're saying. I apologize. I would love to be able to answer your question, but just can't at this time. Maybe we'll try it at a different line at a later time. There was another story, speaking of the wonderful nature of the Islamic religion, that a Spanish child rapist was freed from a 30-year prison sentence in Morocco last week. He has been rearrested in Spain because the uproar of against the Moroccan government for doing this, as he received from the king of Morocco a pardon. A royal pardon, and yet he was convicted for raping 11 children aged between 4 and 15 years old. So here's a Muslim, and keeping with Islam, where rape is acceptable in Islam. A man can rape a woman, and it's the woman who has committed the crime. And a man can have engage in pedophilia with no lower age limit. There is no upper or lower age limit for acts of pedophilia because Muhammad was a pedophile. And the reason that rape is conditioned and condoned in Islam is because Muhammad was a rapist. Islamic law, Sharia law, is based entirely on the words and deeds, the example of Muhammad. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. So here is a Muslim. He was convicted of raping 11 children aged 4 to 15 years old. And then he received a royal pardon because what he did was not against Islamic law. But there are a number of rational individuals that still reside in Morocco. And when he was released from the pedophilia charges, Moroccans marched in Casablanca to condemn that decision and to condemn their king's allegiance to Islam as opposed to morality. He has, of course, under the pressure of public opinion, recanted that decision. When we return to Shattering Myths in a moment, we will turn to Yahowah's testimony, and then on Monday's program we'll turn to the story of the Uncover Mosque, which demonstrates emphatically that Muslim imams and the Quran and Hadith in mosques, they talk about this routinely, authorize pedophilia. I am Yada. This is Shattering Myths.